I'm Deanne Johnson, the Public Engagement Manager, and I'm delighted that you could join us for Public Engagement Partnerships in Practice. We are recording today's session and we'll publish a write-up. And if you missed our last session, an introduction to social responsibility, we'll signpost you to the catch-up resources. As we move through today's session, we encourage you to pop questions and comments into the chat, and we'll have some time at the end to pick up on these. Today, we have a wonderful lineup of guest speakers sharing their practice in collaborating with a range of communities to build strong research partnerships and to co-create purposeful, engaging activities. Today's session will be hosted by Professor Stephanie Snow, who is our academic lead for public engagement with research. She's going to set the scene and context for social responsibility and public engagement before introducing each of our guest speakers and their inspiring practice. Over to you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Deanne, and welcome to all of you joining us in today's session. I'm going to give you an extremely brief overview of how public engagement fits into the wider social responsibility framework, and then we're going to move on to see some brilliant case studies of public engagement in action. So the first slide that we're going to have on talks about the foundations which are part of the new Manchester 2035 strategy. And I know many of you will have been involved in the various conversations and events that we've been having over the past 12 months or so to develop ideas and ambitions about what the university wants and needs to be by 2035. Manchester was the first UK university to establish social responsibility as a core goal, and in the new strategy, social responsibility has an even bigger role because it's one of the 5 foundations that cut across everything we do. So from research to teaching and learning, from our operations to our engagement with communities and the public. And you'll see all this really nicely done on the slide. So moving on to the next slide, the social responsibility portfolio is split into 5 areas. So we've got public, civic and community engagement, and that sits alongside environmental sustainability, equality, diversity, inclusion, and our cultural institutions. So the Whitworth, Manchester Museum and Jodrell Bank. And as you'll see on this slide, our work is focused on addressing some of the most pressing challenges that face our communities and the wider world. So the priority areas, social inclusion, prosperous communities, cultural and digital engagement, environmental sustainability and better health. These are the areas that we think the university is really sort of committed to addressing. They're linked to the university's core strengths and also the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So they give us a common framework for action, and they guide how we connect our research, our teaching, our partnerships to the issues that matter most across our work on the social responsibility portfolio. So in terms of the priorities, we've got those on the left of the slide. But how are we going to address these priorities? So the how is covered by the pillars on the right-hand side of the slide. So engaged research, engaged teaching, learning and students, these are clearly the 2 cornerstones of the university. But we can also make a huge difference by thinking about how we do things. So, for example, our operations, our practice, where do we get our energy supplies from on campus? How do we operate as an employer? How do we sit on the Oxford Road as one of the anchor institutions? All these things are important in terms of us achieving where we want to be. So the pillars of engaged operations and engaged practice sit with engaged research and engaged teaching, learning and students in terms of this is the way in which we're going to do things. So the next slide we're going to look at is in terms of place. So the focus and the impact of the university's work on social responsibility, including public and civic engagement, environmental sustainability, cultural engagement, diversity and inclusion, these can be seen at all levels. So we've got the really nice concentric circle here. So we've got our campus as our sort of core space, but then you can see how it moves outwards. So sort of down the Oxford Road corridor, out to the city of Manchester, beyond the city to Greater Manchester, to the northwest, to national and to international, right through to our partnerships with communities in the global south. Now, just to make clear a bit of a distinction about civic engagement, what we call civic engagement and what we mean by that is the priority that we give to the programmes of work and partnerships and impact that we have in Greater Manchester itself. The university has a long history. It was established by and for the people of Manchester during the Industrial Revolution. And the M2035 work is all about redefining, what does it mean for us to be a great civic university looking forward to the 21st, 22nd centuries. So Greater Manchester is where our main campus is based. It's where 3/4 of our colleagues choose to live. It's where our major cultural institutions are, and where we recruit our largest numbers of UK home students. And it's also where we prioritise and build the deepest relationships with our public, private and community partners. So this is all what comes under the umbrella of civic engagement, and obviously public engagement is very much sort of part of that. So now looking at public engagement specifically, I know it's a bit of a whistle stop, but I don't want to detract from the case studies, but I hope we just now are in a position where you can see how public engagement is starting to fit within these wider university frameworks. So we have a public engagement action plan, and that aligns to our social responsibility priorities and pillars. We've recently established a new public, civic and community engagement advisory group, which I chair, and this brings together representatives from all parts of the university, including the cultural institutions, and we operate as an expert advisory group. We provide a specialised focus on public, community and civic engagement agendas, and we help drive best practice in public engagement. And to the right of the slide, you'll see just flagged up how public engagement features in many of the important external measures for the university. So the Research Excellence Framework, public engagement has a key place in the impact case studies that form an important part of the university's submission. The university consistently achieves the highest rating in Research England's Knowledge Exchange Framework for public and community engagement. And in terms of the Times Higher Education Impact Rate rankings, the university is consistently ranked top in the UK and Europe and second globally. And we're also very proud that Manchester is one of only 2 universities in the UK to hold a platinum watermark for public engagement that is awarded by the National Coordinating Centre for Public Engagement. So I'm going to leave it there. Obviously, any queries, any questions we can pick up outside this session or we can deal with in the chat. But now I'd like to move on to our speakers. And the first set of speakers we're going to hear from, Lindsay Presti and Lena Bartoszewicz. They're going to talk about their wonderful project, Game Changers.
Fantastic. Thank you, Stephanie. It's always great to hear of the wonderful work that's happening and the plans ahead. I'm Lindsay Presti and this is Lena.
Thank you.
We're going to tell you a bit about our project Game Changers. We are based in materials and FSE, and we're in a department called Fashion, Business and Technology. And so that's really where our project started and where the research and the opportunity and the need sort of came from. So next slide. So the project that we run, I lead the project. Lena's now working on this as a PhD researcher, but we were looking at the problem within our society that we know is a problem because it's specialised within our area, but there's a huge issue with textile waste, and it's not a well-known or well-documented or publicised issue at the moment. But what we've done is I started this because I heard industry talking about the issues we're facing as a nation with textile waste. And one of the strategies to deal with this was really about intercepting waste, extending product life cycle, and starting that transition to a circular economy. So we've started with the problem of textile waste, focusing particularly on polyester garments, because we know polyester is made from fossil fuels and so ultimately isn't biodegradable. And we sort of asked, what could we do to tackle this problem? How could we, as researchers, as academics, how could we get involved? And so what we started, and we were inspired to start and sort of challenged to start with looking at football shirts and sports shirts. We're based in Manchester, so it's a great fit. And we started to reach out and explore what is possible. What could we do? We know there's a problem. Is there something we can do to find a solution? And so it's really nice because we've been running the project now for 3-4 years, that it aligns really well with the Manchester 2035 work that's happening, because it is very values led and very socially responsibility as we sort of work with community groups to tackle these problems. Is it you?
Yeah, it's me. So just to give a little bit of background, as I said, I'm Lena and I'm a PhD student now, but I did also study my undergrad here in Manchester, fashion technologies to be specific. And I'm very grateful to have joined the team of Game Changers when it was first started to be developed. So I joined in my second year as a summer intern to develop creative ideas of how we can take these football shirts and upcycle them into new products. Of course, within that is also ways to then how we can teach the community on how to make their own. So within that and the incredible team of social responsibility at Manchester, we were able to sort of outreach and have those products such as I've made bags, like drawstring bags for children to use as their PE bags. You can see here, this was our recent workshop where we've made bucket hats. And you could probably again recognise the Manchester United logo. With the lovely help of Catherine Downing from the team, we were able to establish a partnership with Manchester United Foundation. So I think we've done around 3 workshops with them so far.
Yeah, more, I think
more. And even just then having those connections with local schools to be able to come in and make their own. And we've received really positive feedback with that. We also have touched upon working with charity shops to help them deal with their unsellable sportswear, which again quite closely aligns to my research, helping charity shops extend their product life cycles within the infrastructure of textile reuse. And then we've also had experience with working with other researchers across the department, such as Ganda with Sustainable Threads initiatives, working with marginalised communities and refugees to also learn from them how we can repair and upcycle synthetic materials, specifically sportswear. So there's a lot of things that we've learned. We have now quite a good, rich experience with doing these workshops, and we have always developed and refined over time. And another thing that we've really tried to focus our time on is doing website content. So all those patterns and all those guides that we were given out in the workshops, actually have them publicly available for everyone to use. So that engagement still spreads, not just within events.
Yeah, and we've done that over a period of time. We've always had summer interns.
Yes.
And I have to say, one of the key developments over time has been simplification. So we started with quite complex ideas and plans, and we constantly have to simplify, because when you're engaging with the public and you're engaging with people who know nothing of what we do in the world we live in, it's really making it accessible and making it simple and deliverable. So we've had some great impact and engagement over the last few years. This is us at the Community Festival in the summer, where Lena led there. We've also worked with we've worked with over children who represent over 300 schools locally through Manchester United Foundation, and we did a Eco Reds Day at the Manchester Museum where all the school children came in and we taught them about textile sustainability. We've managed to get lots of media impressions with the association with the foundation, also with Green Football organisation, and with our own work with policy and blogs at the university. We've now developed this. I've been working on develop this in partner-enabled learning, so it's going to be embedded into the curriculum. So we've taken what started as a volunteer project and putting it into the curriculum and having that so it can be done at scale. So I'm very excited about getting more people involved and scaling this up now. We also recognise the limitations of what we can do. You know, having sewing machines, getting people involved is limiting. Equipment is required, and so we wanted to change that. So we not only did we do our community festival and our sustainability workshops and our website, but we've now launched this year for the first time a competition where schools can do it for themselves. So they've got teaching material and they've got sort of inspiration, so they can teach about sustainable textiles, sustainable materials, the circular economy, and it's been working really well. We're getting really positive feedback about how sportswear just really tends to engage a different audience, perhaps an audience that might not normally be interested in textiles or fashion. I always say it's a bit of a magic of football that it engages a really wide audience. We've just getting our own course validated through UKFT, which is UK Fashion and Textile Industry Body, and they're keen to get more and more young people, you know, having a go, hands-on experience. And so we're going to have a very sort of foundational course for school-age children who can have a certified from an industry body to give them the confidence, to give them something to put in their portfolio, something to take away if they come in and do that. And we've also been able to develop international collaborations. So we've taken this over to Italy and we've worked with Atalanta, the Italian football team, and University of Bergamo, where we've done a version of the workshops, and we're just talking to Australia. So we're starting to see some really fun international collaborations, because again, I do think there is an element of that kind of magic, fun engagement of football, which really captures people's imagination in a really interesting way. Next slide. So lessons learned, what's the future? Obviously, we've got our Manchester 2035 and we're aligning with that. I think lessons learned is we started really small, and it's okay to start small. We co-created with other people. So we've got people in the community involved, students involved, staff involved. We had researchers visiting from other universities who came and were part of the development. I think what this does, and what I can see, is that it's about building trust and sort of really developing and getting that proof of concept. Because at the beginning, I have to admit, not everybody could quite have got the vision, but I think as we've been able to demonstrate, test, try it out, find different audiences and different ways of doing it, we've been able to prove that it's a really interesting way of engaging people and teaching about textile sustainability and sewing skills. The creative practice element really drives engagement and interest. People want to get hands-on, they want to have an experience, they want to do something, and most of the time we've got it so they can take something away with them. We don't sell anything, we want you to make something and take it away with you so that you've got that sense of achievement. Key to the development this has been having summer interns. Lena was our first summer intern and now is one of our PhDs, but every year we've had summer interns who've been able to give chunks of time to really sort of do key developmental steps. So that's how we managed to do tutorials, develop new patterns, develop a website. And we're looking forward to partner-enabled learning and scaling this in a much more structured way through the curriculum, and having students being assessed on it rather than volunteering is a really nice way of showing the value of it and the importance of it to the curriculum. And so, you know, looking at this from the sort of bigger perspective and the Manchester 35 perspective, it's a real opportunity for us as a university, as a department of fashion, business and technology, to serve our community and to be that civic university, offering strategies and workshops and practical things that people can do to get involved and to be part of this sort of sustainable social responsibility future.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. That's such an inspirational project. And I can really imagine a University of Manchester bucket hat. I think that could go down really, really well. So we're going to leave questions until we've heard from all our speakers. So thank you both. And if you've got questions and things that you want to raise, please put them in the chat now and we'll pick them up later. But now we're going to move on to see about our next case study. Let's talk about cough. So I'm delighted to introduce Jackie Smith from FBMH and Ellen Dowell from Imperial College London, who are going to talk about this project. Jackie and Ellen, over to you.
Thanks, Stephanie. So let's talk about cough. We all cough. Cough is a life-saving reflex. Sometimes we have a bad cough, sometimes a really terrible cough for weeks at a time. Cough is the most common reason that people visit their GP. 1 in 10 people worldwide have chronic cough, which is defined as a cough lasting longer than 8 weeks that does not go away and does not respond to treatment. It affects women more than men and can last for decades. Physical impacts include broken ribs, sleepless nights, and incontinence. The social impacts are even more debilitating. Cough is persistently trivialised, dismissed, and not taken seriously by medical professionals and wider society. And cough is perceived as irritating, annoying, and threatening, especially since COVID. Let's Talk About Cough is a public engagement project funded by Wellcome and led by the University of Manchester and Imperial College. Next slide, please. Let's Talk About Cough ran alongside a research project investigating the biological mechanisms of chronic cough. This research is about understanding the role of ATP in chronic cough, which causes a hypersensitivity of the nerves in the airways. The scientists and healthcare professionals involved in this research have participated in Let's Talk About Cough alongside people with lived experience of chronic cough. The first part of Let's Talk About Cough was the Story Exchange, an online programme of creative workshops to share experiences about cough. This involved 24 participants, 12 people with lived experience and 12 researchers and healthcare professionals, split into 3 groups, and each group did 8 hours of creative workshops on Zoom between March and May 2022. The workshops were led by experienced facilitators with skills in creative writing, storytelling, poetry, comedy, and visual storytelling. We then transformed these stories into 1 in 10, an immersive audio experience designed for public libraries. 1 in 10 is voiced by 9 of the original participants. It involved the collaboration of a writer, a sound designer, a composer, and a graphic designer, and a creative development process involving research and lived experience participants at every step. People have engaged with 1 in 10 in public libraries, at events and festivals, and online. It was part of SICK Festival in Manchester and the Manchester Festival of Libraries in 2024, and a digital version is available on the Let's Talk About Cough website. Participants' collective experiences of living with chronic cough were turned into a pocketbook for supporting people to manage cough in social situations, which is available on our website. Next slide, please. It's a real challenge to tell the story of a very long, in-depth and messy project, but this is my attempt at explaining what our process looked like. Really, there was very little about this project that we knew at the outset. We thought we would create a programme of in-person creative workshops, but COVID happened, everything stopped for over a year, and when we restarted, it became clear that the responsible approach was to reimagine our creative exchange process to be entirely online. And this allowed us to be very experimental and gave us the freedom to trust the process and let each step of the project inform the next, without feeling we needed to plan too far ahead. Next slide, please. If I were to sum up the process in 1 sentence, it would be an equitable, participatory process of creative exchange and co-design, with researchers and people with lived experience as equal participants. And through reflective practice and our external evaluation, we identified key enablers for this process. For the Story Exchange, we had a team of 5 facilitators with different creative skills who were experienced in holding the space and working with potentially vulnerable participants. At the beginning of every workshop, we always reiterated to participants that it was their choice how much to share, and they always had the right to pass. The value of creativity was felt in 2 really key ways. The first was to create equity and equal power dynamics between lived experience and research participants, avoiding the misperception that researchers are more expert. Everyone was out of their comfort zone in a gentle and positive way and asked to explore their work or their life through unusual, abstract or unexpected creative tasks. The creative tasks also allowed participants to articulate and express their experiences in new ways. Participants were able to make sense of their own personal stories by using metaphor and imagery. One example is a participant describing her cough as an ugly feeling, and if it were an animal, it would be a hyena. Another is a researcher describing the tipping point of ion channels signalling to the brain in response to a cough trigger, being like an avalanche. Alongside this creative exchange between researchers and people living with chronic cough, we made a commitment to listening, capturing the stories that emerged, and reflecting what we heard back to participants to ensure that we'd got it right. And this listening led to internal project outputs that provided the foundation for everything that we did afterwards. We summarised the story exchange in a report including the themes that had emerged and a poem that had been written by the facilitators to reflect back the stories. And participants were given the opportunity to feed back on this report, and then through a further participatory workshop, we developed a one-page brief as a framework for engaging a wider public. The amount of time that participants had spent exchanging their stories and experiences in creative ways, and the commitment to listening and capturing this rich picture of chronic cough gave us a solid, trusted foundation for everything else that we did. So we've been fortunate to win a number of awards for Let's Talk About Cough. Our audio experience 1 in 10 won a Gold Audio Production Award, and we've won public engagement awards from both Manchester University and Imperial College. We have an evaluation report on our website that covers lessons learnt and evidences the impact of the project on researchers, lived experience participants and audiences. And we've recently submitted a grant application for a further stage of the project to develop a toolkit to support local libraries and community groups in delivering community events about chronic cough using 1 in 10. So please do check out our website where you can listen to 1 in 10. But now I'm just going to hand over to Jackie now for her reflections.
So thanks, Ellen. I'm Jackie Smith. I'm a respiratory physician, chair of respiratory medicine in the University of Manchester. And I just wanted to finish up, first of all, by thanking Ellen for leading this project and what a fabulous job she did. I have to say it was an extraordinary experience to be part of Let's Talk About Cough, and a very positive one for myself and the other researchers in the group, for our clinical staff who got involved from the clinical service, and I believe for the patients as well. And also it made me realise what a powerful tool that was, bringing together those different stakeholders in designing materials to help really raise the profile of chronic cough and what a huge problem it really is for people. And then the last thing I would just say is that I can see there's going to be a very significant legacy for Let's Talk About Cough. We already have a website and materials for the patients that on a weekly basis I get positive feedback about from people attending our clinic. And in future, as Ellen says, we're applying for some more funding to allow this to be delivered in libraries without our input. So much the way the previous example was facilitating the delivery of their work in schools, we hope to be able to do something very similar in the future. And with that, I'll stop there.
Brilliant. Thank you both. That was another just wonderful example of how all these things come together, and really a good example of how creativity and science working together really sort of produces fantastic results. So our final case study, I'm delighted to introduce John Keedy, who's going to talk about the work that they've been doing with Manchester Camerata.
Oh, thank you so much. It's lovely to be here, and thank you so much for the invite. I wouldn't be here without the help and support of lots of people. Some are named on this slide and others are not, but so thank you. Next slide, please. I'm going to start this presentation actually with a video. So I'm going to start with the end point. You can hear the very small sounds that people with dementia make, which is then echoed and amplified by the musicians, which is then taken up by the group. And I think it's that chain of reaction that creates the spark that ignites music in mind. At the moment, over 11,000 people living with dementia and family carers across the northwest of England have actually taken part in this project. We can't forget that dementia is built on a person. That's what's most important. One person, one social network, meeting with others.
It's the most amazing feeling when you realise you've made a connection with someone that has previously not found it easy to connect to other people?
When I first started with Music in Mind and the relationship with Manchester Camerata, it was fairly obvious at one level. We are the University of Manchester, and you have Manchester Camerata. So it was very local from the very, very beginning. And growing it from that very local level of collaboration was something that really appealed to me. So we can adopt a set of values and cultures and beliefs that is all about setting a new agenda for the future, based on mutual trust, respect, and partnership. And for me, that's the most important thing. We must respect and trust and honour those we work with. From that, everything else can flow.
Thank you very much. That was filmed at the beginning of January in the snow, both at Gordon Monastery, and my bit was done at the Modern Harris Centre. I'm just an ageing mental health nurse. I worked in dementia care since 1986. So actually being able to work alongside the orchestra, or one of the orchestras in Manchester for the last 14 years has been a real privilege. But when we started this programme, we started really in my office in the G. McFarlane building, and I got visited by one of the community engagement officers from Camerata who said, we'd like to do something different with people with dementia. And I've always enjoyed the challenge of social research and qualitative research and participatory research. So we came up with some ideas which were basically around improvisation studies. And so we have a welcome song, a goodbye song, and what happens in the middle is basically up to people with dementia. It's those touch or the movements or the small sounds that people with dementia make that is then taken up by a music therapist and an orchestral musician. And it's the most beautiful, rewarding experience that I've ever experienced in my 40 years working in this field. The project lasts around about 12 to 20 weeks, and it happens in Gordon Monastery and in different locations across the northwest of England. Next slide, please. I've always been interested in moments. I think that's something that is, because I've worked with people with very advanced dementia where memories can't always be remembered. You might forget just what you've done a few seconds ago. What really matters to me is what happens in that moment. And really Music in Mind is based on that communication of moments. So, you know, if you leave the session and you don't remember what happened, does it really matter? For some people it does, but for people who are taking part of that time, it doesn't. It's that experience of being in the moment. And we were able to, at the very beginning in 2012, to build up that network. I guess I'm a research professor, so it was my job to try to win some monies to support this, which is things I started to do in about 2013, 2014. But it was that partnership with Manchester Camerata, and Bob Riley is the chief executive of Manchester Camerata, which really enabled Music in Mind to happen. Probably the best thing I ever did was win an ESRC case PhD studentship in 2013, appoint Robin Darwell in 2014, and start a programme of research which we've continued to this day. And in 2015, we were shortlisted for a Royal Philharmonic Society Award, which was fantastic, which was down in London. And I'd never been to such a, I'm a mental health nurse with no musical experience in that respect. So it was lovely to be part of this Radio 3 crowd to start to get this work in Manchester on a national stage. Next slide, please. As the last decade or so has gone by, we've been able to form a company through innovations in the Innovation Factory at the university, and we were able to really signpost and protect the being in the moment work. So that was then used to fund a fairly large £750,000 study, which drove forward the ideas about taking this work into care homes and training packages. We developed the ideas around music champions, which happens now around Manchester and Greater Manchester. I won some more money to look at evaluating that process. And we were featured on the BBC, BBC One, the Northwest, about the work that Manchester Camerata is doing in their work with people with dementia. And in 2024, was probably our greatest significant achievement is we were awarded the very first National Centre for Excellence for Music and Dementia. So that again was awarded through Manchester Camerata, through the work with Music in Mind and the Utley Foundation, and the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, placed some of this work right in his manifesto for his mayoral re-election recently. He's very committed to dementia. I'm not breaking any confidences as one of his parents has dementia and lives in a care home. So I think this sort of championed that sort of real policy push to get this really on the agenda. And we currently have a ESRC case PhD studentship basic in music department at the moment with Ruth Shaw, looking at the quality of music that people with dementia actually create in those improvised moments. So the measure is not so much a reflective measure of well-being, it's about the quality of creativity and that creative example of what people with dementia actually, the sparks that they generate in those sessions are so important. The quality of the music can be very, very beautiful, and capturing those moments is something that we're taking forward in the future. Next slide, please. Thank you very much for listening.
Perfect. Thank you, John. Lovely slide to end with, because we can now move on to our sort of question session. We've got about, I think, 8 minutes left in the session. So if you've got any questions, please put your hand up or put it in chat. We're working across multiple screens, so we will really try and see you, but keep waving if we accidentally sort of miss you. So I've just seen we have got a question from someone who popped up and now they've vanished on my screen. Was that Norma? Let me have a look. Whose hand is up? No. Nora, did you have a question?
No, sorry, that was an accidental
Oh,
hand.
okay. That's fine. I just thought I saw a flash. No, fine.
So Stephanie, we do have a question from Mags. She says, amazing case study. You're working on with so many community organisations. Could any of you share how you keep these partnerships going as your work has grown?
Okay, so who wants to start with that? Lena, do you want to talk to it?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I was going to say sorry that Lindsay had to fly off. She's got some teaching, but I'm here to answer the questions. It's a really good question, and it's not an easy one. Of course, yes, we're very grateful that we had so many partnerships that we were able to work with. But sort of echoing a little bit from what John has said in his lovely video, is that when you work with people, I think that trust and mutual respect is really important. And I think when you also acknowledge the work that we do, and then the sort of work that those partners can offer us for that partnership to happen, I think for us it's mainly been events and actual mutual coordination understanding. So for example, with Manchester United Foundation, they would get a lot of initiatives that they would be involved in, such as like the green football, that then they asked us to come and be a part of it, because then they would have their wider partners that they would get involved with. So for us, it was mainly events wise. Same with charity shops, we would, for example, run a workshop with them, and then if there's an opportunity for them to also be like, we want to work in a different community, could you come along and do the same? We would mainly work on an events basis. However, we'd always listen to each other into how we can contribute to each other's work and how we can make it better for the communities and for the engagements. So it is sometimes hard and sometimes it's irregular, but we always find a way to catch up and say, okay, what's something that we can do, something new, something fresh. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Brilliant, thank you. Ellen, would you like to come in about the communities you've been working with on the COF project?
Yeah, we started with 12 lived experience participants, and I think about 10 of them are still connected with the project. 9 or 10, and we over the years of the project, we've done all sorts of kind of different things, but one of the things that worked really well throughout the project, we don't do them at the moment because we've officially finished our funding, but we're something that we just called socials. So we ran them on Zoom, usually about every 6 to 8 weeks. And they were just 1 hour sessions. We didn't have any plan for what we were going to do. Everybody involved in the project was invited to them. And they were just conversations and ways of people connecting with the project and having a chat. And it's there have been times when only one person has come to a social, but it's still been incredibly valuable conversation. And sometimes there'll be like 15 people there. And, then obviously that's a brilliant way of people connecting in a very informal way. So yeah, the socials were a big learning for me that just giving time for having no agenda, just having a chat is really useful in a project like this.
Brilliant. Thank you. John, do you want to come in? Because I think that what Ellen was just saying chimes really well with your saying that you sort of have a beginning and an end for a session, but that space in between is for the participants to shape themselves.
Absolutely, Stephanie. And I think that's if I reflect back on the ongoing relationship with Camerata, I can remember lots, and I still have lots of laughs. You know, it's a strange thing to say, but I think just being yourself, just getting to know people, just being around, being trustworthy, and getting to know each other's roles. I was very uncertain of what an arts organisation did, or what it was like to be a freelance musician. What is that like? I've never experienced that before. So there was different cultures to get to know, different words, different languages, and different working styles. And I think one of the things that we have learned over the years is that we work in a very interdisciplinary way, both from people with dementia who have got their own thoughts and feelings about what we do. And when they were asked to actually create something as a reflection of their time with us, they created a vinyl record sleeve, which was kind of a lovely thing to actually do as a memento of those experiences. So I think it is based on trust and continuity. I've worked with Bob Riley as the chief executive of Manchester Camerata since 2012, and that's been a blessing. And without his support and guiding light, it's been fascinating insight into the work. And we've also obviously involved Camerata as co-applicants and co-supervisors on PhDs as well. So they are very much intertwined with the work that we do.
Lovely. Thank you, John. And thank you. I'm going to pass over to Deanne now, who's going to wrap up the session for us.
What an incredibly insightful, empathetic set of case studies that you shared with us today. So thank you hugely for that. We're going to throw up a quick poll to ask for people's thoughts and reflections on today's sessions. Your thoughts really do help us shape what comes next. So fingers crossed it worked in the practice. Catherine's going to set up a poll for us and hopefully you can see that. It's 3 short little questions. Everything is anonymous, so feel free to be as open and honest as you like in this, and it will help us shape what comes next. So the first question asks, has it encouraged you to think about something differently with regards to public engagement or the practice of or getting involved? The second question asks you to think about, did you learn something new? Were you inspired by something that was shared today? And the final question just asks for some open comments on things that you think we can improve upon or you'd like to hear more about or suggestions for the future. And whilst those are happening, I'm just going to do a quick flick back to the slides. Bear with me in our last moments while I do this. Because, of course, today is not only about sharing the wonderful, inspiring practice that you've heard from our colleagues today, which I do hope you feel a little bit lighter of heart and with hope, but we've got a forthcoming session on civic engagement, which is going to feature John Holden, our VP for Civic Engagement and Innovation, John McAuliffe, who's our Associate Vice President for Culture, and one of our external partners, Sophie Morby, who is the Senior Organiser for Greater Manchester Citizens. And that's going to be brought together by Mags Bradbury, who is our Head of Social Responsibility and Civic Engagement. So if you want to find out more about what civic engagement means in practice at the university, we've got some more inspiring case studies for you. If you missed our last session, we always have a catch-up. These slides will be available, a written report will be available, but you can also go back and hear Julian talk about what social responsibility and civic engagement means and looks like in practice at the university. And we've got shared case studies from each of our faculty Vice Deans for Social Responsibility, and a call to action. And thank you very much for name checking, some of you, the Universal Manchester Festival, which returns on the 13th of June. And there's 2 ways to get involved. You might want to put in an expression of interest to deliver an activity. Last year we had over 80 interactive stores and demonstrations from across all fields and subject matter across the university, and a number of those featured our community partners in action. We also hosted the Be Curious talk and performances, which are TED style, inspirational interactive talks. Or perhaps you're not in a position where you want to deliver a store or an activity, but you still want to be part of the day. So we've just put out a call for festival ambassadors, and whether you're a staff or student, you can join us to help create a welcoming space and ethos for the most local residents and beyond Greater Manchester who join us on the day. So a little call to action for you there. Stephanie, a final hand back to you.
Thank you, Deanne. So thank you to Deanne and Catherine for making sure that this session was so smooth and glitch-free. It's absolutely brilliant. Thank you, all of you, for coming, and particularly our speakers. So John and Lena and Ellen and Jackie, who are still here with us, you know, really inspirational to hear about the work that you've been doing, and long may it continue. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
So with that, we wrap up our session. We hope to see you at a future session. Thank you all so much, and thanks to Stephanie for her chairing and hosting today as well. Have a really great day. The sun is now shining in Manchester. If you're in Manchester, go catch up with that beautiful daylight. Cheers all.